Hi, thanks for joining me. My name's Trevor Magnuson and I'm sharing my guitar building process. In this session we're going to be making the neck block assembly and neck tongue. So once again we're going to need to rip, resaw and mill some timber. After all of that, we have pieces for the tongue, the backing plate, and the receiver channel. So now we just have to glue everything together. Okay, we'll be back when this dries to do the next lot, which will be the receiver channel. Well, the glue is dry now. Here is the tongue. We're going to be trimming that and working on it in a little while, but right now we need to glue the receiver channel onto the backing plate. Now this laminated piece, I have determined these two sides to be perfectly square, and they are going to be the reference. And we have a thin upright, a thick upright and a base, and we use the thin upright and the base to align perfectly square to our reference edge of the backing plate. And we have a piece of scrap that is going to be our stand-in for the tongue that we put in there just while clamping, and then the thicker upright goes there, and that is going to form the receiver channel. And when it is glued, when the glue is dry, that's what we will be left with. I'm about halfway through gluing now. It's very messy, but I have the base and the thinner of the two uprights square and flush to my reference edges of the backing plate. Now I need to clean out as much of the squeeze out in the channel as I can, because it's going to be harder when it's dry and drying. Right, now I've got the thicker of the two uprights also glued in, and so I can remove this temporary spacer piece and clean out the remainder of the squeeze out inside the channel. A moistened tissue and a chisel is what I use for that. Squeeze out at the base of the channel doesn't matter, because we're going to leave a small amount of space for clamping the neck onto the body of the guitar, but the inside faces of the channel is where the glue that attaches the neck needs to be strongest. While we're waiting for that glue to dry, I'm going to square up and trim the tongue to final dimensions, and when the channel is dry, we will drum sand the thickness of the tongue so that it fits into the channel. The neck block glue up is now finished and the tongue is thicknessed so that it fits into the receiver channel. What we need to do now is to trim the neck block to final dimensions and then put a nice round over on the edge that will be visible through the guitar's sound hole. Now it's very important that we label neck, body and up on the tongue because we need to keep that consistent. So I'm putting a big N and a B and an arrow and an N, a B and an arrow. So we'll never get confused again during the build. What I will do now is mark a spot 15 mils in from the top and the bottom of the tongue because that's where we're going to be drilling our holes. Now marking where I want the holes to be with the tongue with a little bit of clearance on either side, about 2 or 3 mils, and I've created for myself a hole centering guide where I drilled a hole perfectly centered and then I'll turn it upside down, drill backwards through it so that the perfectly centered hole here is where the drill bit comes out and drills into the wood. Now that I have perfectly centered holes inside the channel, I can insert the tongue and then drill through the exit holes to drill starter holes into the tongue itself. And now I can drill those holes all the way through to the other side. They're pretty well centered on the exit wounds, but that's not quite so important, not so critical, because that's going to be glued onto the inside of the neck. Now I'm drilling 10mm holes to a depth of 5mm on the neck end, that is the exit side of the holes that we just drilled earlier. Now I want to force fit 2 nuts into the holes that we've just drilled. And to do that, I've threaded them onto a bolt so that the bolt can go through the thinner hole that goes through the entire tongue. I have clamped the tongue to guard against splitting, and I'm aligning the nuts so that the hex points are in line with the tongue. What I'm going to do now is elongate the 2 holes that we drilled in the backing plate using the router table. When it comes time to fit the neck, that will allow the tongue to slide up and down in the receiver channel. Now we can see the final apparatus with the bolts threaded through the slots that we just routed, through the tongue and into the nuts embedded in the end. When the bolts are not tightened, the tongue can slide up and down, which will be useful when we are fitting the neck. Then when we are happy and it is time to glue, the bolts are how we will clamp the neck onto the body. Now, normally we would then take the bolts out. Unfortunately, this time the slots that you just saw me route were not as tidy as I have previously achieved. So we can either leave the bolts in the guitar, they don't look too bad, or we can investigate trying to build a cover strip to cover that little part of the neck block. Well, you know what they say.
If you don't have a plan B, you don't have a plan.
So I've made a strip of wood and cut a channel in the neck block which covers our sins. When it comes time to fit, access will be rather limited. I'm hoping that for clamping, just a friction fit will be enough. Otherwise, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.